Hello and welcome to The Current Thing with me, Nick Dixon, or Dixon Cox, as this version is called, which is, of course, me and Paul Cox going through the week's news. Paul, the star of GB News and the comedy world. How you doing, Paul?
I'm good, thanks, Nick. I am good. It's. I'm not going to say the day. I'm not going to say the day. Look, I've been on professionality training course, and it's not important. It's Christmas. That's what it is, Nick.
Yeah, you can tell it was a real course because it's called Professionality Training Course. I'm not even convinced that's a word, but
It
you knew
can't be
straight
a
away
word.
it was a dodgy course. And it was run by Ed Davey. I believe you've got
Yeah,
an Ed Davey update, Paul.
I do. Ed Davey naturally has this week been in Surbiton judging a young person's Christmas card competition. Of course he has, Nick. Of course he
Perfect.
has.
That is
I mean,
perfect.
you just go to Ed Davies' Twitter. Essentially, he looks like Ed. He looks like Andy Peters in the. Do you remember in the what was it called? The Broom Cupboard,
Yes.
circa 1991 on BBC Children's TV. He's got the jumper on. He's in this tiny room. He's surrounded by cards. A big thumbs up. Interestingly, Surbiton, where he was, is only 3 miles from Chessington World of Adventures. So whilst we still don't have any policies, Nick, he could be off there soon to
Right.
ride the ostrich
He's got a
stampede to
whole
really think up.
he's got the whole thing mapped out like Hitler in a war movie. He's like, we go
He's
here and then to
all
here.
70, all 72 seats are interestingly adjacent to theme parks or just general amusement areas.
That's so funny. He's like, right, we'll hit a few doorsteps, then boom, hit the theme park. Ed, the campaign's over. I love it. By the way, it's so perfect that he's in a Christmas card competition in Surbiton. Like, if I was going to make one up for the Ed David competition, that is exactly what I'd have made because it's so perfect. It's so David Brent. It's like, Taplow. It's just like perfectly shit placed
Yeah,
there. It's
exactly.
Surbiton. This week, I'm doing a Christmas card competition in Surbiton. I know you think our country is on its knees, and I could be looking at policy. Why is he like Rupert Lowe is there going right? I've got the figures for the number of migrants who are on benefits and committing crimes. I'm getting the figures, and we're gonna get it done. Don't worry. And then Ed Davis like, yeah, I'm doing a Christmas card competition in Surbiton. Like, why doesn't he feel any
It's
responsibility to do politics?
straight on Twitter with it as well. It's the sort of stuff that MPs do in the background, isn't it? Community led stuff that's
Right.
just kind of this is your day to day. It's not his constituency either. I think it's Surbiton and Kingston, which are two quite differing places actually. So I can see why he went to Surbiton to do the young person's Christmas card competition.
Yeah, he's mixed up the
Interestingly,
fun extras that you do once a year with just his main job.
he's just gone straight for it, hasn't he? Here I am today at. No, honestly, he. I really don't. And there's quite a. The whole world is burning. The whole world is burning, and Ed Davies just wandering around in novelty jumpers with double thumbs up. Hey, vote me! And they did. 72 seats. 70. I think they got a grand total of 897 votes, and it got them 72 seats. And now we get Ed Davey is essentially third in line to be prime minister in the UK. And he's mainly playing FIFA and riding children's rides.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't believe it's like, Ed? What do you think of the assisted dying bill? Did you vote? No, no, I was opening a shopping centre in Uxbridge. It's just like, what are you doing? Stop it! Yeah, I can't believe they'll do well next time if they carry on like this. But it's madness. Anyway, we do like to get our Ed Davey update because we're turning into a local radio show here. What's Ed
Yeah, you got
Davey
to
been
know
up to?
where he is.
And this week, what is the best crisp? It's that kind of level of content that we're bringing. But we do have very, very serious news to get through, Paul. Today, we're going to go through the German Christmas market incident. We're going to talk about whether Starmer is in trouble, as rumors are flying around. We're going to talk about the Nick Fuentes assassination attempt as well. That'll be a controversial one. Maybe we'll talk about Toby Young getting in the House of Lords just for some bants, and then pick our best and worst Christmas people of the year. That didn't really make sense, but our best and worst people of the year. That's just to give. I've never done that before. I've just given you the whole itinerary there. I quite liked it. It was very kind of professionality training
We have
shining
done the
through.
professionality training, Nick. You sent me on it. You wrote the course.
Yes. And for the hardcore fans, go to nickdixon.net for the full episode. And thank you for all your support on there. We've had amazing comments for these episodes. So we'll get on with it in a minute, actually. We'll even do the episode very, very soon. In fact, now, should we start, Paul? So this
Yeah.
Christmas market incident, very horrific, of course, very serious. This guy plowed through a load of people in however you say Maidberg. I don't know how you say the name. I didn't check. But there was all sorts of rumors flying around. People saying, well, obviously, everyone assumed at first it was your standard Islamic terrorism. Then everyone said, no, actually, he's an anti-Islam activist who was annoyed about asylum seekers coming in. And I'm sort of like, the guy is plowing through Christmas markets. And he's an immigrant from, let's say, a culture that's not perhaps that compatible. That's, to me, you can't really go wrong with that. You can't really go wrong being basically anti-immigration at this point. Just stick with that, and you'll win. I don't particularly care about a guy's manifesto that much. The guy who killed some people in New Zealand said he did it because of Candace Owens and Spyro the Dragon. You're like, people write anything in these things. So, okay, this guy has some complicated backstory, but basically he's a nutter who shouldn't have been in the country. That is my take. Uh, that I think that you can't go wrong with. I mean, I just did a tweet that said keep people who hate the West out of the West, and it was so ridiculously simple. But that's got 1.8 thousand likes because it's just so obvious.
Yeah.
The other big tweet I had, which had, and not to boast about my own tweets, just to show how popular this is as a sentiment. This had 18,000 likes, and it was someone was talking about Birmingham and how we've got barriers up, and it just struck me as I got so enraged watching it, the fact we have to have barriers up at Christmas. I just said they destroyed our country while calling anyone who objected racist or accusing them of various phobias. The elites that caused this are some of the most vile traitors in history. Now, you know, I went in pretty
Yeah,
hard
I
there.
mean, barriers are becoming a fixture of Christmas now, aren't they? Or any festivities.
Yes, and not to
It's
sound too gammony, Paul, but you can't even say Christmas now. GB News has just done a feature on winter markets, and the market
yeah.
traders have been told they can't say Christmas. So there's barriers, and there's barriers to even calling it Christmas.
You just cannot imagine that happening to another religious festival. Let's just, for argument's sake, take Eid. You imagine taking Eid and calling it something like, starvation festimas, or just making what the
Muslim
hell was
fasting,
starvation
yeah,
fest?
isn't it? But Ramadan's
It's
fasting,
not
isn't it?
starvation
Not
at all.
Eid, yeah.
Although they do look hungry to me when I see friends of mine that are Muslim. But like you say, it's fasting. If we just, if we all just appropriated fasting and then changed the name of it and turned it into a big commercial holiday, we and in this particular case, I think rightly so, that would be heavily criticised by Muslims because it's their festival, and it's what they do, and they should be allowed to support that. I don't think anyone has any real issue against that. Of course, some people will have a big issue against where it's done and why it's done, and what that means for the West sometimes. But look, we've got a guy. This is. I'll get to sort of my existential crisis about this particular incident in a minute, but we've got this guy at the moment who is the suspect is a Saudi asylum seeker. He came to Germany in 2016 and was granted asylum a couple of years later. He's an ex-Muslim. He's been described as an ex-Muslim, far right, atheist. Quite clearly, he's German hating. He's Western hating. And he has done a very good impression of an Islamist extremist with what I mean. This guy's a disgusting prick, and I want to get our first swear word out quite quickly. But he is a disgusting prick, and I despise everything he stands for, whatever it is he stands for. It's a terrorist attack, and like I say, it's provided me with a bit of an existential crisis because as soon as it happened, I watched what had happened, and I thought immediately, this is an Islamist terror attack. And maybe that's some unconscious bias to mine. However, there will be a lot of people that would have thought that. And as a result, one thing we should remember is the reason that we thought that is not because we're prejudiced, as many on the left would love to have the rest everybody else believe. It's because we've seen it time and time and time again. The victims are always the same: Western, Christian, Christmas markets, pop concerts, all these things that are bastion of the West, bastions of freedom, being attacked. So this guy, if he's atheist, I don't know why he's attacking a Christmas market. I don't know why he's attacking a Christian festival. If he's if he's anti-Muslim. I still don't understand why. Why I don't wish for him to attack anyone, but why is he choosing to attack these people? Um, I have no idea whether this was some breadcrumb plan where he started his plan 8 years ago and tried to put us all off the scent. And maybe it's quite prejudiced of me to think that that's the case. But what we do know is this guy has followed the strategy of every Islamist terror attacker in the last 20 years in terms of who he's attacked and who the victims are. So I think people can be forgiven for assuming that it may have been an Islamist terrorist attack in this particular instance. And let's face it, we don't know anything. And the reason we don't know anything is the people that are leading the information push, it's in their best interest. So the German politicians, it's in their best interest to play this down as much as possible.
Yeah.
The media in the West, particularly in the UK and Europe, it's in their best interest to play this down as much as possible because they never ever want to feed that division. Not because they don't want the division, but because it goes against everything they believe in. They are very, very keen to ensure that whenever people like you and I question this and go, "Is this Islamism?" That we're shown as a bigoted immediately and wrong. So I don't trust at all the mainstream outlets on this. So as far as I'm concerned, we don't know everything. What we do know is there were some tweets that he sent out and there were some behaviours. But he was also, by the way, a doctor. He was a psychologist. He was on sick leave, but he was a psychologist in Germany. So I heard you discussing this with Leo last night on Headliners. This was supposed to be what was held up as the strength of diversity, the strength of immigration. And like you said last night, all it takes now is for one Islamist engineer to attack, and that's that completely demolished.
Oh yeah.
However,
Go on.
what I should say, just to round up on that thought, is at the end of it, there's a 9-year-old boy who is dead, and there are other people dead also, and there are hundreds of people injured, and there are thousands of people affected. Christmas ruined, not just this year, but probably forever for them, because it will just be reminiscent of what has happened last Friday in Germany. And it's happened because of immigration. There's no if, buts, and maybes, whether you're a fan or not a fan of immigration. It's happened because of immigration. And on at least 3 occasions, the German police were told this is a wrong 'un.
Mm.
And nothing was done about it. And it doesn't matter how many times we ask the question why, it has to stop. We can't ask any more why. We can ask that question now once we stop it. Just stop. If there's a leak, you stop the leak and then you figure out where it went wrong. At the moment, we just let the leak run and run and run and run and run and run and can't understand why we're continuing to get fucking wet.
Absolutely. And I think there's a big difference between the people who are saying enough of this, whatever the specific motivation was this time, versus the people who are so desperate to pin it on the right. They seem more concerned about that than the actual event to me. They just say, it was the right. It's like, well, in our world, we're just against people like me are just against this absurd amounts of immigration, people we don't know anything about, people who don't suit our culture. So we win anyway. So if you really want to play that game, but they want to play the game of it was your fault. And what's incredible, as Leo pointed out on Twitter, actually, Leo Curse, is that the protesters are also called far right. So we're being told the guy was a far right activist who liked Elon Musk and the AFD. At the same time, the people protesting him are also far right. So Independent had who is the Christmas market attack suspect, a Saudi doctor and far right supporter. Then the Independent also had German Christmas market attack, far right protesters rally after car attack kill 5. So it's like there's a far right guy and the far right are protesting him. So is anyone not far right, as Leo said? I mean, that is, grimly comical, very grim, because as you say, it's horrible. Go on.
How often have we seen it described as a car attack?
Oh, that was the other one. I said we need to deport these cars because they keep describing it as a car. Yeah, I need to find that one because as a car drove into all these people. Here we go. Associated Press. A car has driven into a group of people at a Christmas market in Germany. It's like, wow, we really need to sort these self-driving cars. I think something's gone awry there. So I just said Europe needs to start deporting these cars. I mean, insane.
So what we have done, irrespective of motive, is import people into Europe, into the West that hate us. In this case, it appears he hates Germans.
He's got a beef with Germany because
Um,
of their asylum policy. But can I just say on that, because I wanted to say just before you carry on, there is a question of the motive. As you say, some say he's using this loophole in apparently in Islam where you're allowed to deceive if it's in the aim of spreading Islam. That's what they say, and there's a word for it. But some people say it's that. Some people say no, he was not a Muslim anymore, but he still had this beef with Germany. There's a big tweet from the Polish housewife, which got thousands of likes, to Dan Hodges. Dan, do you think it's possible that a man who is capable of murdering innocent people may also be capable of lying on social media? And Dan Hodges wrote, "Lying for what purpose?" And everyone's just like, how stupid is this guy? So, whether he's lying to achieve an end or whether he actually does have those quite strange mix of beliefs, doesn't really matter that much. But anyway, carry on.
so this is where the existential crisis comes from for me, on a personal level. So I'd been in church in Chichester. I went to Chichester Cathedral on Friday night. I didn't have a gig, wasn't working for GB News, and I went to the carol service there, and it was all very wholesome and Christmassy. And I came out of that at about 8 o'clock, and the first thing I saw was that story, and um, I said, because of the state of mind I was in at that point, this is my prayers are with the people of Germany. They should be able to enjoy Christmas without fear. And essentially, our freedoms in the West are once again under attack. I deliberately didn't make any accusation about who it might be, because we, we we've all kind of learnt our lesson on that over the last few years. You can't jump to too many conclusions. However, I'm not afraid to admit that personally, my first thoughts were this was an Islamist attack. Unfortunately, at between 8 and 9 p.m. on Friday night in the UK, if you went on Twitter, your feed was absolutely full of the the CCTV image of exactly what took place. And my stomach is turning talking about it now, because it feels like a movie scene. It feels like we've become sort of desensitized to that type of stuff. But you can quite clearly see what happened. You can only ever do something like that if you are full to the brim of hatred. So my point is, the reason I had this crisis about it is because I immediately assumed it was one type of thing, but held back from saying that publicly. But once I saw the next day that it looked as if it might not be, and we still don't know, I stand by that, we still don't know exactly what the motive was, or what he was doing. I kind of wanted to defend my personal thoughts on it, and some other people's personal thoughts on it as well, because if you're let's just take this as a metaphor and as an example. If you're being beaten up as a child by your dad, let's say, and once you do something wrong, you get beaten up. The next time you do something wrong in front of an adult man, you fear that you might get hit by that person, and that's exactly what's happening in terms of the West, Christianity, and and Islam at the moment. Is that you fear that every time something like this happens, it is that, because we recognise instantly what it is, from Westminster, from Manchester, from London Bridge, to the German Berlin Christmas market in 2016, to what happened on Friday. There's a pattern, okay? So whether or not this guy's motives were exactly what we assumed they might have been at that night, there is a pattern, and we recognise it as that, okay? So anybody who thought that is not racist, is not bigoted. It comes from a place of fear, because they have seen it time and time and time again. It doesn't mean that their motives are misplaced. It doesn't mean, in some cases, it doesn't mean their motives are misplaced. In some cases, it doesn't mean that all they want is for all Muslims to be removed from the country that they're in. I think what most people want recognised is where the problem stems from. It stems from immigration, and it seems to stem from one particular religion, which doesn't, in some aspects of its preachings, seem to be at all compatible with the way we like to live in the West. So I think we can accept that, as well as accepting that quite possibly this guy was not an Islamist. And people shouldn't be overly criticised for that. One thing I did see on Saturday morning was the usual grifters on the left. Like, it was like a gotcha. You can all go back to bed now because it wasn't what you said it was. No, 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 no. So, in order for that to be true, you have got to disprove every other Islamist terrorist attack in Europe, because that has happened time and time again. So, you are wrong. I'm sorry that you're wrong. I'm sorry that you feel that that your political views should outweigh anyone else's fears. And the same could be said of us on the right of politics also. And we have to take a step back, as I have done over the weekend, and made sure I haven't made too many comments. I am, however, quite happy to say I'm very suspicious of what the media are telling us at the moment. Something doesn't ring true.
Yeah, so just on Dan Hodges again, since he's done so many bad tweets on this, I mean, he was at first telling us we weren't allowed to speak, which went so well during Southport. And by the way, we still aren't allowed to say anything about Southport. I almost compared it to GB on to Southport, but we're not even allowed to say that. It's incredible the trouble you can get in for even mentioning Southport, and I've been in trouble for saying something about Southport. So it's quite extraordinary. But Dan Hodges said, because Robert Jenrick posted a fairly decent post, as he talked about, he said, end mass migration, revoke visas / deport those who hate us, give no quarter to extremists. We don't have to live like this. And that was pretty solid. Whatever happened, whatever the granular detail, that actually works. And Kemi had posted nothing at that time. I don't know if she has now. Dubious choice for Tory leader. And Dan Hodges replied to another Jenrick tweet and said they also deserve politicians who will, because he said the public deserve politicians who will implement the policies necessary so they can attend Christmas markets. He said they also deserve politicians who will pause a few hours before seeking to leverage political capital out of appalling atrocities committed in foreign states. So I said, I'm sure Dan will let us know when we're allowed to speak. Suppressing the truth around these attacks has worked so well thus far. But when he did think he had a win, he was happy to weigh in. Now, you can say he weighed in with some irony because to make a point that you shouldn't weigh in. But what he said was, we're told we need plain, honest speaking around the Islamist terror threat. Fine. It's now clear that if you support Tommy Robinson, the AFD, or Alex Jones, the attacker was one of your own. So it's like, so he's going, okay, well, then it was this. The glee to say that, and you can say he's being ironic because he's saying, if you want to announce it too soon, then I'll announce this. But it's so weird because it's like, we're aimed at not having people attack Christmas markets in our countries, and you're aimed at making the right look bad. It's just such a sad. They're so dedicated to liberalism at all costs, even though obviously aspects of it just aren't working.
It's. I often have this thought. Okay, so if we treated our country like we do our school playgrounds, it'd be a much safer place. When you and I grew up, I was walking past my primary school earlier on this year, and I noticed that when I went there in the late 80s, the fences were sort of 4 foot high and anyone could look in, etc., etc. Probably get in no trouble as long as they had something to, they could go in there with a stray dog or something. Say, can I show this to the children at assembly? And they would have probably been given half an hour to do just that. However, now they are like Fort Knox. You can't get in, right? We have rightly decided that the most vulnerable people in our society, other than elderly people, of course, are children. And we are going to do absolutely everything to protect them. Now, if 3 or 4 times a year a man climbed into a school playground and killed children, we would try our best to stop men getting into children's playgrounds. What's happening now is because we can see the obvious problem there and the obvious solution to it. What's happening now is these attacks are happening time and time again at the same places. And what's preventing us from really doing anything drastic about it is politics. Because people are being told that if they point that out, they're in some way prejudiced or bigoted and we should be accepting. Now, that is, if somebody climbs into a children's playground and I say, come on, guys, we should just be accepting of these people, who doesn't want to kill kids, etc., etc., I'd be quite rightly seen as an absolute lunatic and taken to one side and given a damn good talking to, if not a couple of snidey punches in the guts. But it's because it's not seen as political, because everybody can agree on that we should protect children. But why do we not want to protect all of society? And we could quite easily do so if we can all agree that this stuff is fucking evil.
Well, just to push back slightly, yes, I had this similar thing. I went to see my primary school, but it was years ago. I was back in like 2005 or six or something, and I was back at home, and I saw they put up all these fences we didn't used to have. We just had these little low walls. We didn't have any of that. I was like, oh, that's changed. So yeah, you're right. But where you're wrong, of course, Paul, is that when it came to the grooming gangs, no one did care about children. I suppose they weren't young children; they were maybe teenagers, but no one did care at all because it was politicized, and suddenly it was turn a blind eye, ignore them. Or in the case of the girls in Barrow in Cumbria, of course, where I'm from, my
Mm,
county, they said that she was the problem. They didn't believe her, and they said she was trying to blackmail people. This girl who spoke out against this horrific abuse, and she was kept in like a house and abused for like days and stuff. And this would go on many times. It's unbelievable. You can't actually read about it without getting so enraged. You're like,
yeah.
just it's so. Where can you even begin with that? And we've not reckoned with that, by the way, as a country. We've not had a full reckoning, and because it's ongoing. I mean, it's ongoing in many towns now. But rather, we haven't we haven't understood yet what that's done to us as a country, the trauma of that, and the fact that it's always swept under the carpet by our sick justice system and our politically correct police. It's so sickening. You can't even. Where do you even start with it?
Well, we've got, and there's endless crime dramatizations and documentaries on British TV. We're fascinated with true crime, and whenever you see, a dramatization on the BBC, they use profiling to identify who the killer or the culprit is, and of course, that's what they do because 9 times out of 10, that leads you to the right suspect. So the idea that profiling society in order to identify who the greatest risk to that society is in some way prejudiced. Yes, and with good reason. We should discriminate against certain types of people, like paedophiles, etc., etc. There is no two ways about it. And I know there are aspects of our own society that would be protective of that and call them minor attractive people. Well, chuck them into the mix as well, then, because we need to keep an eye on those people as well, because that's a massive, massive red flag.
Yeah, can I
If you
just add
don't
one
call
thing?
some,
If
yeah,
it's
sure.
if it's white people or whatever, English people, whatever you want to say, if we're because there's a claim that white people are disproportionately more often sort of pedophiles. If that's true, then fine. Then investigate them more. I,
Hmm.
I don't I don't care. Whoever it is, maybe white people do fraud more or something. That's fine. I mean, you're saying what Sam Harris said ages ago. It's one of the few sensible things he said. He said that if there are people at the airport, if you're at the airport and you need to search a certain number of people, maybe you don't search the granny from Ohio. Maybe you search the guy who looks like he might be the terrorist. And that's just people. Some people aren't going to like that, but that's just resource management, and it just has to be that way.
Well, yes, and this, of course, happened in the German markets just this Christmas. So what they did is they banned knives, with good reason. But whilst they weren't policing a guy that had been reported 3 times to the German authorities that he's an absolute wrong and showing evidence, reams and reams of evidence, just the day before, by the way, he was due in court, and he tweeted stuff just last week that was just basically telling us that he was going to do this sort of stuff. But what they did is they wandered around the German markets taking penknives off of elderly people. There's a viral video that you can find on Twitter of an elderly woman having a sharp object taken off of her. Now, of course, that's one extreme, and I just talked about profiling, and perhaps profiling doesn't capture absolutely everybody, and that's how some people get away with it, of course. So but the point of profiling is it gives you a really high probability of identifying who the suspect is, and you know that in that profiling, it's not going to be that elderly German lady who just happens to carry this around so she can cut some string in the garden,
Yes.
etc.,
Well,
etc.
Germans have
So
been known to take a rule too far, but go on.
they have. But we're all in this together, you see. When we see, I'm sure you feel the same way, Nick, but when we see this happening in Germany, it could easily have happened in London or Portsmouth or Cumbria. It's a disaster waiting to happen, and it's a powder keg because all the right ingredients are in place. because right from the mid 90s up until this point, we've encouraged this, and we've encouraged it by doing two things. We've opened up our borders and said, come on in, come on in, come on in, grow our economy. Our economy, by the way, is on its arse, so that has not fixed anything. And the second thing we did is we said to anybody who disagreed with this or raised the alarm and went, this could be a bit of a problem, we vilified them and made them out to be racist scum in some way. And the trick they've been able to achieve is they've actually got a majority of people in the media, in the chattering classes, the elites, whatever you want to call them. We've got them to go along with it as well. And it's only now that we're starting to see that some of those people are waking up, going, "Oh, perhaps this wasn't such a good idea whatsoever. Perhaps we should." The thing about, I mean, just take for instance, Stephen Fry just recently on trigonometry, the way that he seems to have changed his views on free speech. He is the epitome of the chattering classes, and in him coming forward like that, some would argue, maybe a decade too late.
Mm-hmm.
It's proof that even the most intellectual among us can be easily hoodwinked. And the problem is, and we saw it with Southport and we saw it over the summer with the riots, is it's those people that are loudest about it that aren't being listened to, largely because they're working class and they're ignored.
Yeah, it's well, Stephen Fry, I would say, is yes, is sort of cynically now figuring it out. He's gone. He was woke before, and now he's sort of changed his mind. So yeah, that on him. Although I haven't watched it. While we're talking,
Yeah, I've watched. I mean, I've always been a big fan of Stephen Fry. Um, Lots of things he's contributed to, I really enjoy. I try not to bring, I don't bring everybody's personal standpoints into not enjoying their art. So I'm quite happy to say that, and of course he famously said that just because, what did he say? He said, just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. Famously said that
yeah, but he's
long
been all
before
over the
even
map.
Ricky
He's
Gervais
been
said
very
things like
woke at other times, and he's
that.
been
Yeah.
very anti-white. So nah, Fry's dead to me. Maybe I'm not as nice as you though, Paul. I'm just like right, dead to me. I'm just trying to on this topic. I'm trying to find this guy Mehdi Hassan, but he seems I can't find it now because it's relevant because he was replied to Constantine, and obviously I don't always agree with Constantine either, but he had a simple point where he said that people aren't not everyone, not all cultures are equal, and that's the key difference. Here we go. Western countries won't stop suffering terrorist attack after terrorist attack until they let go of their most cherished belief that all people are equal and that all cultures are the same. Very, very simple, but some people, of course, freaked out about this. But it's just obvious that it should be obvious. But that is the difference between the left and the right. The right is okay with inequality and celebrates it because you can only have equality by getting rid of freedom because you have to. People are naturally unequal and different. So the only way you can achieve equality is by removing freedom and forcing them to be the same. But Carl Benjamin had an interesting reply. He said you're asking them to give up liberalism then, and thus ensued a debate about whether equality was inherent to liberalism. Some say it is, some say it isn't. Carl says it is because if you have to say people are the same. If you say people are equal, inherently you're saying they are the same, and that's what liberalism does. Constant said you can do it while still having liberalism. He says in response to some responses, to say that we should practice liberalism within our borders, but recognize that it cannot be applied internationally is not a contradiction. And he goes on a bit of length about the U.S. Constitution and stuff. Maybe I agree more with Carl. He says all men are created equal literally does mean all human beings. And anyway, it goes on and on, but we can't solve that debate right now on this podcast. But that's the thing people are so uncomfortable with. If you say, oh, certain cultures are different, I mean, it's so obvious cultures are different, and I'm fine with that. Cultures are different, and there's pros and cons, but you don't bring in cultures that don't mix and that hate other cultures. It's pretty simple stuff. But if you say that, you are attacking one of the pillars of liberalism, of our at least of our progressive liberal elite. Whether it is textbook liberalism or not, one can debate. But until our elite accepts that, this will keep happening because they don't have the will to fix it. So they'll have to be replaced with a counter elite, or they will just or they'll fix it themselves eventually if they want to maintain power. But they're under so much pressure now because it's not working. What they're doing isn't working. Their inherent assumptions are wrong, and this is what's coming out. And there was an interesting thing I want to ask you about here with Musk saying that the AFD is the only solution, and some people see this as shocking because AFD is seen as far right, and of course in Germany that has an extra tension, obviously. But Libs of TikTok, who some people don't like as an account, but it was quite interesting here. It shared a few, or she shared a few screenshots of Daily Mail articles, one and other publications. One of them said, "Migrant who beheaded his victim and caused his intestines to spill out while still alive could avoid deportation from Germany because he will probably just come back from Somalia." That's a headline from the Mail from August this year. Another one in Zero Hedge: German criticizes judge who fined Syrian for raping 15-year-old girl gets fined twice as much. Here's another one. Germany: woman convicted of offending migrant gang rapist receives longer prison sentence than the rapist. So this is where we are with the liberal elite. And Elon Musk quote tweeted it: "Only AFD can save Germany." And people are like, "Oh, Elon Musk is supporting the far right," but he's just he's supporting populism. There's a populist party in every country. In Germany, it's the AFD. Are they further right? I don't. Maybe I don't know, but it's happening all around the world. You've got Maloney. Whether they're all effective is another thing, but you've got Maloney, you've got Reform here, who seem pretty moderate to me. Maloney seems quite moderate despite the history of the party. You've got Polyev is being talked about a lot in Canada. So something's got to give because our current elite, as I said, have completely betrayed us and they keep allowing this to happen. And they're breaking their fundamental duty to keep these countries safe.
Well, if you take Elon Musk's comment literally, he's absolutely right, isn't he? Because there is no other party in Europe or Germany that are speaking the rhetoric the alternative for Deutschland are saying, because they're too scared to, because they're so entrenched in this wokery progressivism and sort of the worst kind of liberalism. And I'll take you back to my analogy about the leak. It's very simple, this solution. Stop it like a leak. Stop it. And if we discover that it's just elements of certain parts of cultural groups that are causing the problem, we tackle that and we allow the majority to continue seeking immigration across Europe. But we do it in a very controlled fashion. It's really simple. It's not difficult. It's not prejudiced. You just have to protect your borders.
What
and you
does
have to
stopping the
protect
leak
the
mean,
people.
Paul? Does it mean halting all immigration for a
But
time?
so yeah, good point, because people might have forgotten it was 30 minutes ago. But essentially, at the moment, we have got this using the metaphor a leak to describe the open borders policy that we've got across Europe, where everybody is leaking in, and we absolutely have no idea where it's come from, and it's a huge influx. So you stop the leak by stopping that entirely. You pull the gates up and you say no more at this point, and we're going to do an investigation and we're going to identify what is making our country unsafe, irrespective of what's going on in the world, because that is not our problem. Now, there are arguments that certain aspects of war and problems elsewhere, particularly in the Middle East, were created by us. However, we are going to protect our people because it's our people's taxpayers' money that is funding everything that we're doing. So we have to protect our people. And what AFD are doing, and what Donald Trump is doing, and what the Conservatives in Canada are doing, and what Reform are doing, is they are the only party, populist, right-leaning or not, it doesn't really matter. They are the only people that are saying what the solution is and openly talking about it as a problem. Because everybody else is weasel wording it to death. Oh, not sure. Can we say that? I don't think that's right. All this bullshit is happening, and meanwhile, kids are dying. So, the facts speak for themselves. So my point about the leak analogy is stop the leak, analyze where we are, and see what we need to do.
What about the people
Okay.
already here? Just send them
So,
all
well,
back.
that's a part of that investigation into what the problem is. You then start looking at what you've got here. And do you know the first thing you should do is account for it? That's exactly what Trump's team's going to do. I forget the name of the guy who's going to be the border czar.
Tom Homan.
That's the guy, Tom Holman. I mean, this is a tough, hard-speaking dude. Okay, so I think the first thing they're going to try and do in the first 100 days is A, stop the leak, and B, identify where the unidentified people are, which we would need to do across Europe, and we would need to do it in the UK as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you want to protect your population safety? I just don't get it. And the reason you won't is because there's enough people on the other side of their argument that will insist that in doing that is in some way prejudiced. Well, so what? The answer to that is so what? You have to look after the greater good. You simply have to.
Hmm.
We have. People say that Britain doesn't have a culture. Of course, we have a culture. It's a culture that is spread across the west of Earth. We respect and protect certain aspects, okay, and we're not doing that any longer. The reason you can say now that Britain doesn't have culture is because it's been eroded to such a point that we're actually able to say, "Don't worry about it. You're racist if you try and stop this." It's pathetic.
Well, we spread
We
it to the
find
whole world,
ourselves.
not just the West.
Well, yeah,
The
exactly.
whole, all
We
the
find
world has British
ourselves.
culture. That's why people sometimes struggle to define it because we invented everything.
Yeah, well, there is an argument that that's true, and right the way back to the Crusades. But obviously, there are people that will just look at it and say what we've done is terrible, and why shouldn't the UK be full of absolutely everybody? Do you know what? It's a wonderful way to look at life, and if that caused no problems, none of us would care. None of us would care whatsoever. It's absolutely fascinating. I remember it's a good 15 years ago now, moving to work in London for the first time, having worked in and around Hampshire my whole life. And I thoroughly enjoyed it because there were so many different people from so many different backgrounds. And I came from somewhere where everybody was from the same background. Wonderful people, wonderful people,
Great
educated
people.
people doing middle management type jobs and working in the civil service and all these other things. Okay. But that's not representative of the wider community. It only takes a walk around London during the day or at night to identify that very quickly. And it's as lovely as it is, it's not working.
Correct.
It's not working. And people say, well, there's only one terrorist attack every few years or whatever. Well, who gives a fuck? There shouldn't be one in 100 years.
Well, Sadiq Khan
It's
might say that.
mental to use that. Absolutely mental to use that as a justification for anything. Even when you let's take British culture, right, right down on the fine granulation. Football hooliganism. We were great at it. Some of the best in Europe, okay? But when it became too much of a problem in the mid 80s and we were kicked out of European football, we did something about it. And by the early 90s, it was just a very, very small minority of football fans that were involved in football hooliganism. And the vast majority of football fans did not agree with it whatsoever. We stopped it and we tackled it, okay? We should be able to do that across the rest of our society, across the rest of the demographic, and say, we're not happy with this. We're just not happy with it.
I agree, and obviously, and I'll just give you another tweet I wrote because it was reminded. I was reminded of it by something you said. I just said, in hindsight, it feels like I grew up in a Christmas movie. Now we live in a dystopia of crime and degeneracy, where one is constantly on edge. From being one of the highest trust countries ever seen, our politicians and institutions have deliberately put us in constant danger. And I didn't read it that well because I'm very, very hungry. But the point is, Paul, uh, this is exacerbated somewhat, of course, by me moving from a small village to London. But when I think
Sure.
about my childhood and just this idyllic village where everyone knew each other, whatever personal problems I may have had, it was honestly, it was like a Christmas movie. And then you look at now, every time I leave the house, on edge, just after I wrote that, I went outside to go to the shop, and there was two police vans on my street, and I'm like, this is it now. Every day in London, you're on edge everywhere. You look at people, you're like, I don't know what that language is. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you're from, and it's a constant distrust between everyone, and it's as we all know, it's got way out of hand. All the
And the
policies we've talked about,
distrust,
low trust society. We had a high
distrust.
trust society. That's completely gone because people don't share our values, and that's what it comes down to. And that's what it means to have a high trust society. You've got to have the same values, and we don't have that. And that's where we are. You don't all have to be identical, but you have to have shared values. Now, of course, you can go too far with the values thing to where it gets ridiculous when you pretend that Britishness is just a set of values, which it's not. Because as people point out, we're not a propositional nation like America. We are a place, we are a people, and that's just how it is. But anything else on that, Paul, before I move on to Starmer?
No, I could talk all day about this. I'm incredibly passionate about protecting our values.
Same. And I want to protect our
Uh,
country because England is, and I'm very objective, England is the best country in the world that there's ever been. English people are the best. And I'm not as nice as you, Paul. My favorite people are straight white English men from comprehensive schools, ideally from the north, but I'm not a bigot. I'll speak to southern people. I'm an open minded guy. But they're the best. And I don't even include women. I'm like, it's not just like I'm not just a racist. I'm like no women either. It's just straight white men who look exactly like me. But yeah, anyway,
Well, that's what happens when you feel unsafe, Nick.
you're right. I can only talk
That's
to
what happens.
you and Tonks and a couple of other, and I noticed that about myself. It's like, oh, these are all straight white men, the same age roughly, from the same background. And I'm like, yep, I'm closing the borders of my friendship circle. No, I don't know.
Well, I
That's
think
just a self-deprecating joke. Of course, just a cosmopolitan guy.
so. You asked me if I had anything else to say on this. I think we've dedicated a lot of our time to this, rightly so, and we've dedicated a lot of time to sort of trying to identify how things can be improved. But I think we should finish just by saying, God, thoughts and prayers. And I know people really, I got a bit of flack on Twitter for saying no more thoughts and no more prayers. Well, do you know what? On a personal level, that's all I can give to these people. But thoughts and prayers with those people in Germany that have been impacted by this, because it all too quickly gets lost in the debate. And this is Christmas, and then there's a 9-year-old boy who's not going to see another Christmas day, and his parents are going to have to live with that for the rest of their lives.
You're right, and people are so detached from that when they're trying to score political points, which I don't think we're actually doing. I think we're trying to solve the
No,
problem.
try not to. Desperately try not to.
Yeah. Okay.
But at the same time, pointing out where some of the obvious solutions might flip in lie.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly do this Starmer story. Even though I'm trying to lose weight, I'm just not eating anything today, and it's not working because I can feel that I can't form sentences properly during this podcast. But I thought we'd quickly do this one on the YouTube and the audio for all our lovely free listeners who are almost as valued. Um, so the Keir Starmer is in trouble. So there's a couple of pieces. One is in the Daily Mail. Keir Starmer had no plan after taking office, and his government is already defined by drift and dysfunction. Insiders claim. Actually, this piece is just a copy paste of a New Statesman piece from Jason Cowley, and the idea is that Starmer's just in trouble with sources for multiple reasons. One Labour veteran says the riots saved Keir, but then he says in 1997, Jonathan Powell had a plan for the first 100 days of government, but this lot has no plan. So that guy claims that the riots, or that source claims that the riots saved Starmer, which I disagree with. I think they're more like the lockdowns. Some people may have liked them at the time, but we'll see long term they were completely wrong. Starmer's response to the riots was completely wrong. Obviously, I think that already, but I think people maybe deep down realize that and eventually will realize it. But let's give him that for a second, as I said on GB, and let's say that the riots helped him. He still has this list of other problems. The elderly people with the winter fuel payment, the waspy women, whatever you think to these policies, the farmers, small businesses with the national insurance contributions, they're having trouble. Bank of England says zero growth, so the budget was terrible. Allegations of sleaze with the freebies and Lord Ali. Allegations now of cronyism with the House of Lords nominations. Just everything, and just his approval rating, what
Mm.
-32 it reached. And maybe you believe that he's doing the tough decisions now, so that later it will be even worse. But hopefully people have forgotten. But it's like he's got to really hope his tough decisions pay off. And there was this other article this week about does he regret anything? And he said no. He was asked, he said, is there anything you would do differently if you were starting out now, knowing what you know? The PM replied, no, we had to do the tough stuff. We're getting on with it, and I'm very pleased to be delivering from a position of power rather than going around the division lobbies losing every night. I've had too much of that. So he says that he wouldn't do anything differently because he lacks all self awareness, as we know about Starmer. But he's in big trouble. And there was another piece, and it is from Dan Hodges, so massive pinch of salt, of course. But it was in the Mail Plus, and he was saying how people are weighing up already whether there should be other another leader. So there's a question of whether Labour are done because of all this. Perhaps not, but whether actually Starmer could be done because people are weighing up streeting. If you had streeting in your party, you'd be a bit worried when you're like that guy. He definitely wants to be leader. You'd
Oh,
be eyeing up streeting, going, hang on, he's planning something.
as they say in sort of political journalist parlance, he's on manoeuvres.
Yeah,
100% Wes Streeting is on manoeuvres. Just his last BBC Question Time performance was very much being very careful. I mean, even taking pot shots at Ed Miliband. And, that that is something that's relatively easy to do. For those who don't know, Ed Miliband can barely eat a bacon sandwich, let alone be a serious politician. He obviously stabbed his brother in the back and achieved absolutely nothing as a result. Um, I'm sure, I'm sure the family rift is entirely healed, and there may not have even been a rift. But David Miliband was a much better politician than Ed Miliband by a country
On
mile.
that point, it's quite a good rule of thumb. If what you've done resembles a biblical story intended as a warning, you know what I mean? If it
Bit
resembles
of
like the
Cain and
first
Abel,
ever story of Cain and Abel,
yeah,
maybe don't like copy that.
yeah,
Dave.
unbelievable.
Ed. Poor old Dave. Yeah, David just never recovered from that, did he? He just disappeared, sort of, from politics. Incredible.
So, so, so Wes Streeting, the reason he threw Ed Miliband under the bus is because Ed Miliband was the Labour leader in 2014 when Labour voted against taking any action in Syria. So the UK and the US were looking to take some action against Assad, and essentially it was voted down because the Conservatives at the time, which would have still been the coalition, just about the coalition between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, Nick Clegg and David Cameron, of course. David Cameron, big fan of dead pigs.
We thought Nick Clegg
Uh,
was useless till we met Ed Davey. But
yeah,
carry on.
yeah, similar sort of thing. Although Nick Clegg is now
Head of Facebook. He's basically
head of Facebook
Zuckerberg's best
Europe.
mate now.
Yeah, so he's friends with the lizard people. That's what he is now. But so Ed Miliband, whipped everybody to vote against any action. And the reason, you might be looking at that thinking, well, of course, why do we want to get involved in third party wars? Why do we want to, particularly if you're listening from the US, of course, if I was in the US, I wouldn't want to get involved in any wars across the world because you are one of the safest located countries in all of the world. You've got two massive oceans either side of you and enough problems at home. But here in the UK, historically, wars that are happening in Africa, the Middle East, and Europe really can impact us. And it did. It absolutely did, because Assad was allowed to go on until obviously, which is now 10 years later. He's obviously changed jobs now. He's opened up an opticians in Moscow, but in the 10 years in between, he caused absolute havoc, and all of those people that left Syria seem to have, not all of them, obviously, a bit of an exaggeration, but a lot of them found their way to the UK, and have caused us endless problems, and have caused endless problems in Germany and Italy and other places, and France, of course, across Europe. So, Wes Streeting, long story short, that wasn't a long story short, that was a long story long. Wes Streeting attacked Ed Miliband and said he thought that was wrong. Of course, Wes Streeting is a relatively young man. He wasn't actually an MP in 2014. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's barely 40 if he's 40. So he wasn't even in politics at that point, I don't believe. But he is on manoeuvres, as I
41.
said. So
He's younger
he's
than you,
41,
Paul.
is he? He is younger than me. I'm 45. You're
We don't need to get into
42,
me.
3.
The point is, he's younger than
Yeah,
you.
okay,
He's
yeah.
younger than
Sorry,
you.
yeah,
That's
you're
the bottom
27.
line. By the way,
We
it's maybe completely tasteless, but could you see Assad and Ed Davey opening an opticians together in a sort of spin-off show? Just worth thinking
Good
about.
to. Yeah, just both of them in Christmas jumpers.
And Ed's just
One
like
of
the
them
annoying
checking.
sidekick. He's always trying to cheer up the office, and Assad's like, "Well, I'm trying to do serious work here, Ed," and just thinking about killing him all the time. But Ed's like,
So
"Go on."
Ed Davey, he's a favourite of mine because of some of the ridiculous things that he's doing, but he's absolutely harmless. You could say his heart is always in the right
Well,
place, and you could
he's
say
no
that he's the
Assad.
perfect. He's no Assad, that's for sure, and he's probably the perfect leader for the Liberal Democrats. It's the sort of person that they usually have in charge. Um, Although Nick Clegg was a little bit more of a political beast. Anyway,
Although
that
he did
didn't
eat
end.
cereal. I've derailed you. So you were trying to say that Wes Streeting
Yeah, the,
something.
the initial question was about Keir Starmer and the fact that he's in danger. Okay, so Wes Streeting is very much on manoeuvres, and I think that he would be the most likely person to be the next prime minister. I mean, Angela Rayner would absolutely fancy it, but she's someone. For those who are unaware, there's two channels within the Labour Party. You've got the parliamentary national voted in leader, which is Keir Starmer, and then you've got the union voted in leader, which is his deputy prime minister, or deputy party leader. There's some debate on whether that automatically makes her deputy prime minister. However, she is the deputy prime minister, and that's Angela Rayner. So she came up via the unions, and Keir Starmer came as part of the national vote. And he has no choice on who that deputy leader is. I assume there's some manoeuvring he can do in the background, but there's very little choice as far as the vote goes. But I just don't see Angela Rayner as someone who becomes prime minister of the United Kingdom. It's not going to be Rachel Reeves.
Well,
Rachel from accounts, as everyone in the Reform Party now seems to be calling her. So the point being, okay, Starmer could potentially be under attack from a whole number of people in his cabinet, but it feels that, and this rumor keeps growing in the UK day after day after day. There are reportedly 100 backbenchers who believe who are ready to move and for a vote of no confidence. That would not be enough, of course, but it's enough to certainly unsettle. But of course, Keir Starmer is under threat. And I'm going to save some of my opinions about Keir Starmer to behind the paywall, not because I want people to go there, just because there's something else I want to talk to you about a bit later, and I'm going to talk about it there. But Keir Starmer has proven himself to be a very bad leader for this country.
For some reason I thought you were going to say a very naughty boy. I don't know why.
And it is Christmas, and he's not going to get any presents. He's at the stage. You and I had this conversation privately just yesterday. He's at the stage of his premiership where his friends are saying he needs a rest. Okay,
Right.
that doesn't normally happen after 5 months. Not at all.
The speed of it is incredible, and that suggests how unstable our political situation is, which it is across the West. Can I just give you this from Dan's article? Were you about to make a point that I've interrupted?
No.
Okay, because Dan Hodges has this article. I've paid for it like a mug, so you don't have to, because I pay for all these publications because this is my job. And it's in the Mail Plus. He says, as one MP told me, if you look around the cabinet, Wes Streeting is more articulate and ambitious. Yvette Cooper is more focused on detail and delivery. Rachel Reeves understands the party better. Bridget Phillipson has a better policy vision. Wow, what a terrible list of people. Pat McFadden is a better political manager. Angela Rayner connects more with our key voters. So what box does Keir actually tick? It's a good question. Because what does he do? He's a sort of bland mix of everything. He's a sort of nothing person. I mean, if you look at that list, Streeting is the most obvious to do well. Cooper got attacked over mince pies. Did you see that? She was carrying a tray of mince pies to just hand out. Now, this is how you know someone's hated. When they're giving you free mince pies, which is one of the best things to happen. You just say, someone's offering me a free mince pie. The answer is always yes. Maybe this is why I'm slightly overweight. But that's always a yes. It's like a free mince pie. Who in England would say no to that? Right? Well, quite a lot of people now, but as we've discussed, because our culture is very different. Who in the old England would have said no? No one. But Yvette Cooper's offering them, and she gets accosted by this woman. He says, "Yeah, Yvette, yeah, you give him a pie, but you should give him a blanket because everyone's freezing, aren't they?" And just hammers her quite brilliantly on a number of points. And of course, you can always attack politicians, and it's in some cases it can be vulgar, and throwing milkshakes at people is disgusting. But in this case, just like this party is so out of touch with people. It's so out of touch with its own voter base. Who likes these people? These people are hated so much that they can't even give out a free mince pie. Even a sort of relatively minor figure like Cooper, who's not like Starmer, where he's a figurehead of hatred. If Cooper can't even give out a free mince pie, doesn't that show you how hated the party is?
Yeah, absolutely. They've managed to alienate huge swathes of the UK. Interestingly, Dan Hodges said that Angela Rayner appeals to the Labour base. I don't buy that.
An
I
aspect
don't
of
buy
them,
that
maybe.
at all. Just in the sense that, when Nick Clegg in the 2011 as Lib Dem leader in the 2011 campaign, and of course became coalition leader with David Cameron, a number of his pledges included, I think, getting rid of the student charges, so paying for education. I think it
You're
was.
talking about Clegg and
So
the Lib Dems. Yeah,
yeah,
that was the big thing. They promised no tuition fees, and they completely went against
no
it.
tuition
And that was
fees.
the end for
Yes,
them.
it's coming, and of course that was a massive tentpole in his campaign, and he immediately gave that up, and of course he lost all credibility from there on in. Angela Rayner may well connect with the base, but the base have been absolutely stomped all over by Keir Starmer's Labour. And if she was connected with the base and she is seen as that person, I'd imagine that reputation is close to being in tatters now.
But could they say, well,
We're
no, Angela would
streeting,
fix it.
however.
She just has no power, and but if she took over, she would look out for
Well,
us.
she keeps talking as if she has. I mean, of course, she doesn't have any. She just gets to sit on the front bench, um, and she's outspoken. But if you're sitting in the cabinet, and we see this time and time, it doesn't matter what colour the party is. When that cabinet's dissolved, or there's a general election or whatever it might be, how often do people sit in the cabinet say, well, of course I couldn't do anything about it? You are one of the 10 to 12 most powerful people politically in this country, and you are telling us that you are so inept that you could not do anything to influence, change, or set policy that might help out your political base. I just don't buy it. I know being in power is very difficult, as Labour are finding out, because they have talked a good game for 14 years, and they really are not playing a good game now. There's some of the worst politicking that we've probably ever seen, and it's born from the base, from the place that they are only programmed to do one thing, and that is be in opposition, and they just don't know how to lead.
Yeah, well, if you look at these candidates, so-called, or prospective backstabbers, none of them are any good. I mean, Rachel Reeves has this terrible budget that's caused zero growth, and she puts up a picture of a communist in her office. Bridget Phillipson's awful. She was responsible for spiking the free speech bill, and she's also been involved in the freebie scandal. She's awful. Pat McFadden, I don't know loads about, to be honest. Rayner, we've just discussed, and obviously she's thick as a brick. I mean, what was it? Abstract. The Tories have been an abstract failure. It's like, and she meant abject. It's like that's just shocking. That's just, I can't even begin.
I'm, I'm from a very working class background, so that might have even been the sort of thing I may have said in the past. I don't know.
Yeah.
I often look at things like that, and yeah, you're absolutely right. You expect better.
Maybe it's because I'm an English graduate, Paul. I just can't. I just cannot with that. As they say. Vet Cooper, awful. She's. I mean, she's just carried on all these non-crime hate incident things. She hasn't done it. She hasn't got a hold of the boats issue, etc. Maybe she's not as solid as some of them, but some people think she is. Streeting is, yeah, he's hiding away. He's like trying to reform the NHS. He's the most poised to do it, definitely. But not that anyone should trust Streeting. The idea that one of these leaders or one of these candidates is going to change anything for Labour is also silly. Of course they can't. They're all basically of the same ilk, um, and they're very worried about reform. They say here that people keep saying there's going to be a reform breakthrough. Well, if you come to the doorsteps in my patch, they've already broken through. The question is whether we can beat them back and whether Keir is the man to beat them back. So they're very worried about reform. They're not so worried about the Tories with useless I don't say useless Kemi, but the Tories that they're saying are not even too much of a threat to them. They're worried about reform. And then you get into the larger question, are reform really the people to do it? Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see them do well. I particularly like Rupert Lowe at the moment, but you do wonder, are they too watered down? Are they containment? Are they like, oh, look, now you get your little populism thing you wanted, but actually they don't do anything because we don't know what their policies really are? There's a counterintuitive theory that says actually if Labour change their minds and on big things like immigration and some other issues, they could actually be more effective than someone like Reform, who will give you a kind of, a nice sort of, oh, I'm standing next to the flag, I'm drinking a pint, and I'm saying the right things as sound bites. But always a suspicion with Farage is, will they actually do anything real on policy? Rupert Lowe seems really serious, but let's see. I guess I don't know. I'm torn on it all. I mean, I guess this Labour government's so awful that presumably you do still want reform. And I did vote for them, but I don't know at the moment who. I'm not quite convinced anyone, except Rupert Lowe at the moment. I'm not quite convinced anyone has what it takes to really do what's necessary.
Every time you talk like this, Nick, we get viewers, listeners in the comments saying, Nick, stay with
Stay with reform.
reform.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And you know what? You're not going to get a better option for the things that you want, for sure. In fact, we've talked about the big, we've talked about the big void in UK politics, and it is only being filled by one party at the moment. And trouble with a void that big is it's very difficult to fill it and do it in a way that everybody's happy with. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with reform. But we are going to see, I'm sure, over the next 2 to 3 years, huge movements towards reform. I mean, just today, I think um, they are now hit something close to 120,000 members, and the Conservative Party have only got 130 something members, and they're second to Labour, of course, taking to account all the unions. Um, but it isn't going to be long before reform, in terms of the size of its membership, takes over the Conservative Party, and there will be one or two, maybe even 10 or 12 Conservative MPs that will look at that and go, "I can see where the political winds are heading, and I perhaps, could save my future by making a move."
Yeah,
And we're going to see a lot of that, I
doesn't that?
think.
That's what worries me though. You see, people say, "Oh, just stick with reform." I'm not going to blindly stick with them. I'm going to just stick to the truth because Zia Yusuf, I don't know anything about. I'm not sure about him. Nick Candy's gone across, and yeah, they need money, great, but he was supporting Labour until very recently. All these Tories going across. If reform just became the new Tories and didn't properly tackle immigration, then they would be pointless. Okay, they might do something better on the economy. That would be nice if they did a slightly more free market budget maybe. But if they don't tackle these problems, there's no point to them. But yes, there is hope. Rupert Lowe has brilliant tweets. He's doing stuff. He's getting this data released, which was a story we could have covered really, but he's getting this data released on asylum seekers and so on. He's doing some good.
Well, I'm sure we will cover it one week, because that's going to become lots of things are going to happen in January.
Yeah,
The Southport trial starts for a start,
yeah. We're not even allowed to say anything
and all
about that.
the
Let's see.
no, but we can here. And what's
Say
going to
that, but this
happen
is a. I'm
is,
the publisher here, Paul. I've been in legal trouble
yeah,
even on my
well, yeah,
podcast.
I don't, and when you say anything, I don't think either of us are going to say anything that's going to get us in trouble. However, what we will be able to do is commentate on what's coming out of the trial. And I think there are going to be a number of surprises that I don't know this, by the way. You will see other political commentators, particularly on the right of politics, that will say things like, "You're going to see a few things come out of this trial that you won't like," etc. And they may know a lot more than I do. I don't know anything, but what I do know is a lot of it was suppressed. So uh, it'll be
Yeah,
interesting to
well,
see what
I was
happens.
very vocal on it at the time on Twitter, and people were like, even Toby Young said to me, "You're not worried about getting a knock on the door from the police." I was like, "Aren't you Mr. Free Speech?" And it's like I was just tweeting what anything I wanted, but now I'm like scared because GB is like drilled it into us. We're not allowed to mention it like at all, and we're all. And I recently had a legal issue about stuff that happened on GB, and I've had a legal issue about stuff that happened on this podcast. So I'm like, the British legal system, and you've got defamation as well, which is basically anything, anytime anyone wants to sue you, and you've got the contempt of court rules, which are just so Byzantine in this country. You just like anything can get you in massive trouble. So it's become a. But yeah, when we find out, it's going to be very, very interesting. Um, but I don't be too down on reform. But if they're going to be the Tories in a different hue, a slightly lighter blue, then there is absolutely no point to them. But yeah, let's see. Let's see. Just finally, then to wrap up that topic and to wrap up the free podcast, Paul, do you think Starmer is going to go? Is there any realistic chance of that, or is he just going to hang on like the dead-eyed shark that he is?
So I think he will hang on, and I think that he will still be in charge by about the middle of 2025. But in the second half of 2025, I think we could see Keir Starmer gone.
Okay, and who will come in?
So, but I do believe that when there is a change, and I think there will be a change, I think at this moment in time, my best bet would be Wes Streeting will come in. He's on manoeuvres. He seems a very astute political beast, and he's definitely better than anyone else that's being put forward.
All right, well, we can all look forward to that. How incredibly grim. So, thank you for listening if you're on the audio version. Thank you for watching if you're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. My YouTube doesn't have enough subscribers. It's ridiculous. So please subscribe to that. If you want the full version of these, go to nickdixon.net, where we just tell it like it is. I keep seeing all these people saying, "Oh, we're just unleashed and we're unfiltered and we tell it like it is." I'm thinking you're pretty filtered actually compared to. I'm like, wow, I'm really unfiltered if you're unfiltered. We have people on there, Carl Benjamin, Nima Parvini, and others. We have controversial thinkers. We have controversial views. And in the new year, I'll be doing a lot more interviews as well. But go over to nickdixon.net for that. Thank you for listening or watching on the free version. Thank you to Paul for doing it at Paul Cox Comedy. Anything else you'd like to say, Paul?
No, I'd just like to wish all of our YouTube and free viewers a very Merry Christmas, and I look forward to more Dixon Cox in 2025.
Absolutely. We look forward to more Dixon Cox and have a great Christmas. And we'll see some of you on nickdixon.net.